Awesome. It's 5 o'clock, so we'll get started. Hi, I'm Anna Marquise, and I'm the Acting Director for the Equality State Policy Center. I'm also the State Coordinator for the Wyoming Coalition for Healthy Retirement. And thanks so much again for joining us tonight for the post-legislative session wrap-up webinar hosted by us, the Wyoming Coalition for Healthy Retirement. Just to cover a few housekeeping, we're in webinar mode today. So that means that the panelists can see each other, but as attendees, you have your video off and you're muted. I would ask that if you have any questions throughout the entire program, please drop them in the chat and we'll try to answer them at the end of the show. If we don't get time to answer them, I'll drop my email in the chat and we'll make sure to follow up with you. Also, if you run into any tech problems, send me, Anna, a message and I will try to help you as best that I can. And now we're going to have our panelists introduce themselves. So Ron, why don't you get us started?
Hello, it's great to, I just looked at the participant list. It's so great to see so many faces or names that I recognize. My name is Ron Sniffin, and I am the Executive Director of the Wyoming Education Association. And I'll pass it off to Betty Jo.
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad you can join us. I'm Betty Jo Beardsley. I am the Executive Director of the Wyoming Public Employees Association, which represents all state employees and some classified school district employees. And I'll pass it off to Kevin Reddy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Reddy. I am the president of the Federated Firefighters of Wyoming, and we represent the career firefighters that respond to public emergencies in the state of Wyoming. With that, I'll pass it off to Vicki Swenson.
Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Vicki Swenson, and I'm president of Wyoming Education Association Retired, and I am on the coalition in that capacity as one of the goals and purposes of Wyoming Education Retired is to protect our pension system. So I'm on the coalition then as well. Thank you. And pass it off to Mr. Wayne Schatz.
Thank you, Vicki. I'm Wayne Schatz, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Retired Education Personnel. And once again, we work very closely with the WRS, the Wyoming Retirement System, to do those things that we can to make sure that the retirement program continues as it has been successful in the past. And I'll now pass it off to Mike Bleakley.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Schatz. My name is Mike Bleakley, and I'm the Deputy Director for the Wyoming Retirement System. And our mission is to provide expert administration and responsible investments of Wyoming's public retirement, and to provide financial security for our members and their families. So we're really proud to be here and to provide education and our experience to the members of the coalition. Thank you.
Awesome. And now we will go to Ron and Betty Jo, and they'll give us an overview and history of the coalition.
Great. I'll start us off, but it's going to be a team effort. I was talking to Betty Jo earlier today about the history of the coalition and from what I could remember. And she reminded me that the coalition was started back in 2011. So we are quickly approaching 10 years as the Wyoming Coalition for a Healthy Retirement. Back then, throughout the country, there was a trend for states, because of financial situations, to look at their retirement systems and either threaten or actually do change their retirement system from a defined benefit contribution. That's what the retirement system is, where you know what you're going to get when you retire every month, to a defined contribution retirement system, a 401k type of a plan, so to speak. And there were efforts to try to get some money from their retirement systems. And of course, when things are happening around the country, people come into Wyoming, legislators hear what's going on from different sources, think that it might be a good idea. And back in 2011, there was some legislation that was being considered. And Betty Jo was among the people that first participated in the coalition back then. Betty Jo, give us a little history.
All right, thank you, Ron. The coalition actually started in December of 2011 with 6 organizations. The ones that are on the panel tonight, plus AARP and the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chief of Police Association. And amongst the 6 organizations that started it, there were actually 2 lobbyists for each group that that way we could cover both the House and the Senate. And amongst those 6 organizations, if we would have added up all of the membership within those groups, it would have totaled over 90,000 people. And so we were able that year to work on 3 pieces of legislation, the changing the pension to a 401k, elimination of the COLA, and starting the tier system for future employees. We managed amongst all of our membership to kill the pension changing to a 401k by a 30-30 vote in the House. Senate File 59, which was elimination of the COLA, it did pass, but when it passed on the Senate side, it was for the fund to be at 120%. We knew that if we had to wait till the fund was at 120%, nobody would ever see a COLA. It got amended down to where it is right now, that the fund needs to be 100% before a COLA can be considered. And then the tier system, they did add what is known as the tier 2. This did pass the legislation, and it was for anybody that retired or was hired after July 1 of 2012 would go into tier 2, which was moving the age 60 to 65 and the rule of 85, which is your age plus your years of service. So we were very successful in killing 2 of those attempts of the 120% and then the change to the 401k. But we're still dealing with the issue of the tier system and the COLA today. And I did a little bit of research before we went on this afternoon, and I want to inform everybody about how hard it is for the coalition to constantly keep educating the legislature. In 2012 session, there are only 9 House of Representatives left out of 60. And there are, pardon me, there's 8 House of Representatives out of 60 and 9 out of 30 senators. So you can see in the last 10 years, we've had change in the makeup of the legislature. And every time that change happens, we have to educate those legislators on the retirement issues. So it's a never-ending battle, and that's why we encourage everybody to join with us, to talk to legislators, to help us get the message out and help either pass a COLA in the future for retirees now, but someday we'll all be retired and it'll benefit us too. And there was an attempt, I believe it was 2 years ago, to add tier 3, and we did manage to get that bill killed. But it's just a continuing battle, and so we encourage everybody to jump on board with the coalition and help us. Thank you.
So with after we beat back the proposed legislation to change to a defined contribution, we realized, as Betty Jo said, there was a lot of misinformation out there or no information out there. So recognizing that there was a void or misinformation out there, the next approach was to educate not just legislators, but as many people as we could talk to. So we partnered with the Wyoming retirement system. They were and continue to be fantastic. We held a whole series of, I don't know how many town hall meetings throughout the state. We'd have an introduction from the coalition. The retirement system they don't officially belong to the coalition, but they're a huge, fantastic resource. And together we held and continue to hold a multitude of town hall meetings to fill that void with the truth. If we continue to tell the public, who again in turn tells legislators, there's nothing wrong with the Wyoming retirement system. It's among the top 10 in the country and the top 3 in many areas, including administration fees. That was our strategy. But then about 3 years ago, we realized we've got a very strong coalition, and it's been so long since there was a cost of living adjustment, 2008. We really started to strive to see how can we get some relief for the retirees. So 3 years ago, we had a meeting of the coalition, realized the climate wasn't really good for a cost of living adjustment, plus the fact that back, as Betty Jo referenced, there's a stipulation that a COLA, the legislature basically took power away from the retirement system and said you can't grant a COLA unless the corpus is 100% funded. So knowing that the corpus wasn't 100% funded, what are some other things that we could potentially do? And thus came the idea of a 13th check. The first go round, it was for 2 years. The first year funded by the general fund, the second year by the retirement system. We didn't make it that far the first year. The second year we brought this very similar bill and made it through the House. That was great news. It was killed in the Senate. It was kept in the drawer. So we continue to make strides, and we'll talk more a little bit later about our last attempts. But we've got such a good coalition that we're looking at ways to provide not only relief for retirees, but protect the system. As Betty Jo said, there's always schemes, and we do our best to do what we can. And I can't believe it's been almost 10 years we've been doing this, and we continue to do the good work. Anna, let me know if I can add anything else, or I'll pass it off to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Betty Jo and Ron, for that overview. Next, we're going to move into an inflation adjustment and why we need it so bad. So I'm going to pass it over to Vicki. She'll get us started. Vicki, let me know when you want those slides up.
Trying to get unmute. Oh, and thank you, Ron and Betty Jo, for that background. That was very interesting. I came to the coalition probably 3 years ago when we were starting, like what Ron was just talking about, the inflation adjustments. And many people at that time, and me included, thought, well, we're doing okay. You know, I'm not hurting. Nobody that I know, my colleagues, they're not hurting. And so it doesn't mean, but it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do because it invites people into our state. They know we have a good pension plan. They know they'll, as an educator anyway, you're kind of expect that you're going to get pension increases along the way. But it didn't take long for me to realize, no, we need a COLA. Just because I can do okay, there are a lot of people who don't do okay, and there are people that actually are in the pension system that are slipping into poverty. There are people, stories from people that they have to decide on which medication to get, or they might have to treat their heat turned down so they can get both their medications if it's a cold spell. So there is issues of poverty, and what people I did not realize, and WRS has some wonderful, wonderful things on their site. If you ever want to know anything about WRS, go to their site. They have great information, and if you can't find it, they'll get it to you. But there's 100,000 member accounts with the Wyoming retirement system. That means 1 in 7 Wyomingites are actually direct financial status, direct financial stake somehow in the system. That translates to 17% of the population of Wyoming is in the Wyoming retirement system. So when we say a few people get this, 17% of the population we're talking about. And so there's a lot of people. And then we also have a breadth of, there's educators, firefighters, public health workers, judges, law enforcement, as a whole gamut of different organizations or different employees that are involved, and who belongs to it. Every kind of age. So Anna, if you'd put up slides 8, we'll kind of see what the members in the age category are in the Wyoming retirement system. Well, I'll do that one. Well, that's okay. I'll do that one. I just said that one. That's okay. That's where I got my information. There are 100,000 members, 1 in 7 Wyomingites, 17% of the population. And their wonderful graphic from WRS shows that we could fill War Memorial Stadium 3.5 times. That's a lot of people. So we're talking about the needs and the interests of a lot of people when we talk about getting some kind of COLA. Okay, now if you go to the next one. And this is our age category. I find this very interesting that we actually have somebody 108 years old. And as you can see, there's 17 people over 100 years old, 715 are 90 years old. And when you think about those people that are of that age, when they entered their careers, whatever, if they were a public service worker or a fireman or whatever, police officer, whatever they were in their working world, they didn't make much money back then. A 90-year-old who's 90 today, when they entered into whatever profession they did when they were 20, that's a lot of years ago, and they didn't make much money. And so when we look at getting any kind of COLAs or increases, they don't get much with that either. And so when we think about this many people in our system, and if I have to get my thinking around 715 people that are over 90, and if any of those wonderful souls that serve the public for so many years is in poverty, it just makes my heart cry. And so this is not only the right thing to do to get us some type of a benefits increase, we need to do that. Okay, then my next slide, I want to talk a little bit about, it's 13, I think. Okay, that one. When you look at that slide, if you across the top, it says monthly payments by amount in Wyoming. And then you look at it, well, look at the number of people that are making less than $500 a month. And I kind of looked at this with my little ruler and tried to figure out how many people are in it. And so this is just my figure. But when you look at the first 3 columns, people that make under 500, people under 1,000 and under 1,500, that's probably half the people that are in our retirement system. So those are the people we're looking at that are very much possibly slipping into poverty. A lot of people say, well, I'm doing okay. Well, but you were both in the system. But when we have single people who came into their profession that long ago, they're on very minimized income. So there is absolutely a need for a coalition. And the part that I get from a lot of people, especially right now in Wyoming, is that, but you're asking for a raise and our state is in terrible, terrible straits. We can't afford to basic needs of our communities, and you're asking for a raise. And so I'd like Mike Bleakley to talk to that, how that doesn't compute, about that the state's in trouble and we're asking for a raise out of the retirement system.
So Vicki, I'm sorry, I want to make sure I'm answering your question correctly. So can you rephrase what
I'll rephrase it. So does the budget deficit of Wyoming, do we have to consider that when we're talking about getting a COLA for some type of raise for people in the retirement system? Like, does that deficit affect us? And do the systems go back and forth as far as the funding?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think the answer is somewhat complex. I mean, as Ron had alluded to earlier, with the 13th check legislation, that would be basically you get 1 extra month's payment each year for 2 years. And the way that that legislation was designed was that there was an appropriation from the legislature for the first year. So, to give everyone in our system a COLA, you're between for a one-time cost of living adjustment or inflation payment, as we're calling it, is between $4.5 to $5 million. And so it would cost the state money if they're giving us an appropriation to pay that to our retirees. The other option, which was in that legislation and has also been in legislation since then, is they take money out of the corpus. And what that means is if there's $8 billion in the public employee plan, they're taking $5 million out of that $8 billion to give everyone a 13th check. So you can do it in different ways, and that's something that we talk about a lot. Does the money come out of the existing retirement funds, or does it come from a special appropriation from the legislature? And there's been some other ideas, kind of some creative, think outside the box answers, which we can certainly talk about more in a little bit. But I guess my answer would be, there's multiple different ways that a COLA could potentially be funded.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a lot. But one of the things that was kind of floating around there with some of our freshman legislators was that we have so much money in the Wyoming retirement system that we could just fund education out of it. And so that's not a option, is what I'm telling people, because they go ahead.
Sure, Vicki. And yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that's obviously paying for an inflation adjustment is different than funding the general fund. The way the statute is written, it says specifically that the money in the Wyoming retirement system, it's called the exclusive benefit rule. And what that means is that the money in the retirement system is for the exclusive benefit of the members. So it's actually the members in the system who own, it's their money. It's not the state's money. And so anytime they say, well, let's join the retirement system with another agency, or let's, oh, there's extra money there, that's not allowed by the Wyoming Constitution.
Okay, thank you. And I guess just in my closing, I'm just going to say that I came on to say, is there a need? And I'm saying there absolutely is a need. And I also want to echo what Ron and Betty Jo said, is that we need to constantly educate our legislatures. Every time we get a new batch, we need to educate them. Even the ones that have been there, that aren't part of the new batch, need to be educated. And we need to do that all year long, not just when the legislature comes. And this year, in the interim session is going to be on, and there's a lot of things going on. But please try to contact your legislators between sessions and talk about the need for some type of a benefits increase. And when our legislation comes up, if it comes up this next session, we are absolutely going to need people to advocate, and we'll be sending out lots of information. So what we'd also like you to do is get on, go to the Wyoming Coalition for Healthy Retirement website. And if you're not signed on already as a person to get the emails and the updates, please do that. That will keep you informed. And I think Anna probably will put that in the chat. And so that's what you can do now for your retirement and for future retirement, and know that that you have the Wyoming Coalition is really there and watching and is on top of it, but you have to play a part too. This is your retirement, and we need you involved and advocating for whatever we come up that's best for our system. So I guess that does me in. I'm done. Thank you.
Awesome.
Doesn't do me in. I'm just done.
Awesome. Thanks, Vicki. We're now going to start talking about this past general session, bills, what happened. So I'll actually pass it off to Betty Jo to get us started.
I'm trying to get unmuted. Thank you. Well, this year, instead of trying for a COLA, we or the 13th check. Actually, Anna, I think I want to pass it on to Ron, because he actually worked on the legislation more than I did of drafting what we were attempting, but we do want to continue in the future anything that will pertain to increasing the retirement benefit to retirees. And so what we've tried in the past, what we've attempted this year, and what we're looking at the future all does tie together. So Ron, I'd like to pass it off to you so you can talk, because you were closer to the legislation this year than I was.
You bet. And I also want to bring in Anna. She's not just a moderator, she is a lobbyist and an expert. And right there in front, I can't say enough about Anna and her work at the legislature. So we didn't get that far with at least one piece of legislation, the 13th check concept. As you know, this session was brutal. There was very little chance of getting much passed that involved the money, even if it didn't involve the general fund. We had Representative Harshman and Representative Henderson signed, and others, I can't remember who all was on the bill, a bill that incorporated the 13th check concept, but, and I'll speak to it later, Anna, unless you want me to speak to it now, but a study of this other concept to find other sources or to utilize gains from the retirement system corpus that could potentially be used for relief for retirees. But ultimately, the bill, I believe it was House Bill 211, was drafted, had a lot of information in it. Again, the 13th check concept, but it didn't even get introduced. So, but I think it was just the nature of the session. So many heady, important issues, financial and otherwise. We just didn't get that far. We were hoping to at least get the concept for the unanticipated gains endowment. And if I may, I'll just speak to it since I've spoken to it. I know it's on the agenda later. But so working with the coalition and having conversations with the Wyoming Retirement System Board of Directors and having conversations with staff from the Wyoming Retirement System, we realized that the Retirement System Board of Directors' hands are somewhat tied based on legislation that was enacted many years ago. Back in the day, the retirement system could determine when a COLA could be granted, to whom. They could basically come up with whatever system they wanted to, obviously being the fiduciaries of the trust of the retirement system. They were smart and would do what they felt was best. For some reason, and I really don't know why, and I do know some legislators who enacted some of this legislation that said, whoa, we need all the power. Sorry, I'm being a little snarky. We need all the power. Let's take the power away from the retirement system. We don't trust you. We want the retirement system corpus to be at least 100% funded before we'll let you have the ability to grant a COLA or whatever. So recognizing that the retirement system's hands are tied, talking to staff from the retirement system, talking to my colleagues around the country, I do want to emphasize, and maybe this is a good time to weave in a partnership that we have with the National Public Pension Coalition. They have been instrumental in some of the work that the Wyoming Coalition for a Healthy Retirement has been doing. About 2015, I think, is when we first approached the National Public Pension Coalition. And who they are basically a coalition similar to the Wyoming Coalition, but at the national level. So they include the NEA, the National Education Association, the parent group for Betty Jo's, the firefighters, and some other entities. So they're amazing. They have not only provided us significant grants, but what I really appreciate is their expertise. They have shown us what other states are doing. They are constantly giving us updates on attacks that are happening around the country, and that's helpful because what happens around the country can bleed over into our state. So working with the NPPC, working with experts that work with the Wyoming retirement system, and recognizing that hands are tied. Let's be honest. If a COLA can't be granted until the corpus is at 100% funded, and the last time I checked, that's going to be about 30 years. I'm not sure I'm going to be around then, and I'm not sure how many of my friends that are on this meeting are going to be around then. So what that means is never, right? It's never going to happen. So how can we come up with an idea or a concept that maybe we can find some relief that gives the retirees some relief? And here's the concept for the unanticipated gains endowment. And the conversation started about 3 years ago when there was a pretty phenomenal return on investments with the retirement system. If I remember correctly, it was about 18%. Keep in mind the retirement system, their actuarial expectations to reach 100% funding in 30 years, or just their anticipated gains is about 7%. Some years are going to be more, some years are going to be less. On average, 7.5% is, invested wisely, they should be able to get about that much of a return. Holy cow, 2 or 3 years ago, like 18%. It's like, that's a windfall. That's huge. I mean, let's. And so the idea, and I researched this, and some other states do different things, but so when there's an unanticipated gains, like of some extreme amount, 18%, what if some small percentage of that was siphoned off and put into a separate endowment account that the Wyoming retirement system could use? And they're really smart people over there. They could figure out ways to and identify people in the retirement system that could really use a little bit of money. So, for example, if it was 18%, 18% back then on an $8 billion with a B corpus was like $1.4 billion. And that year we were only asking for like $5 million for a 13th check. That's a drop in the bucket. So this whole idea of let's siphon off some of the money, put it in a separate pot that the retirement system can determine what's the best way to use it, who's in the most need. And yes, the pushback is going to be anytime you siphon off, if you don't put those returns back, you're going to delay that goal of 100% funding, which is going to be in 29 years, which again, never for many of us. So, and another argument is, people that were teaching or working for a state agency from 1990 for 20 years to 2010. It was their money that's now in the corpus. It's it was part of their compensation package. Why should they not benefit from this unanticipated gain and reap some of that reward today while they're still alive, instead of waiting until, we do want COLAs in 30 years. Never for me, but that's fine. So anyway, that's just a concept. There's versions of it, Arizona, Connecticut. So I made a similar presentation to the retirement board, and they're wary, but they didn't say no, they didn't endorse it. So I think part of our campaign moving forward is to certainly have the endorsement of the retirement system. But that's the whole concept of this unanticipated gains, siphon some of the money off, use it now, or whatever the retirement system decides to do. It could be enough to provide in 1 year a 13th check. They may decide, that they may decide that there's like those graphs that Vicki showed a minute ago. All those people that are just getting so little, maybe focus on those that are in poverty. Whatever they decide, I don't think we need to be too prescriptive. I think my past experience with legislators and legislation is they do want a lot. They do want a lot of those details. So those details can be yet to be determined. But anyway, coming back to this last session, we did have that concept ingrained in the House bill as a study to be reported back to the legislature. I think it was in September. That didn't get passed, but I don't think there's anything that prevents us from lobbying the retirement system to study it, or us, to see if there's some viable options. Until we, and keep in mind, and one little caveat on that concept was that you have to have some guardrails. You can't be siphoning off huge gains when you've just had 4 years of really lousy returns. So let's say there's a 75 or 80% threshold and minimum threshold of where the corpus is funded. And currently it's about, I don't know, 78, 79%. But so I don't disagree. Let's make sure that the corpus is sound. But once we reach that minimum threshold and there's unanticipated gains, and let's hope they continue. I know the last 3 years have been pretty good. And let's make it maybe stages where if it's between a 10% and a 13% return on investments, 1% goes into that pot. If it's over 13%, less than 16, maybe 2%. Those are all the details we can work out. But again, working with NPPC, working with other states, we've got to figure out a way to provide some relief for retirees. And I think there might be ways to do it. So I think I went out of order on that. And Betty Jo?
Ron, in defense of you saying we didn't get very far, well, I don't think anybody got very far on their legislation this year because of the handicap we had of COVID last year. Every year since the coalition's been in activation, we've had town hall meetings around the state. The minute we find out what kind of legislation is going to be introduced so that we can get the message out. This year, we weren't able to do any of those in-person meetings to answer everybody's questions, to tell them what we were lobbying. But hopefully in 2021, we can actively participate in getting people involved instead of by Zoom meetings, so that you can actually ask questions, have them answered, and then you'll know how to deliver the message when you're talking to legislators. So we did the best we could on the legislation we did have, but it's not been a normal legislative session for us.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, Betty Jo. And I'm going to pass it to Kevin just to give us some updates with the Federated Firefighters of Wyoming.
So thanks, Anna. I mean, and certainly considering retirement issues with the Federated Firefighters, firefighters are somewhat unique. Along with police officers, we are not eligible for Social Security. So when we're talking about 13th checks and the ravages of inflation rate increases, it really hits firefighters hard in that they don't have the constant COLA adjustments coming from Social Security administrations. And even if a firefighter works their entire career and are able to work a second career, their Social Security benefit is cut by 2/3 because of their public pension. So when we're looking at our fully matured oldest retirees, and the Federated Firefighters represents Fireman's Plan B in the Wyoming retirement system. Our first retirees started retiring in 2007 after a full career, and they've lost approximately 20% of their purchasing power when it comes to providing for their families in retirement. So the idea of inflation rate adjustments and cost of living adjustments are crucial for retired firefighters and police officers. So that's why this legislation is so important. And whether it's a 13th check or creating a endowment where we can take a bite out of the inflation rate increases, that's certainly one of our priorities as the Federated Firefighters.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. And well, I guess that covers it for our 2021 session bills. I'm now going to pass it over to Wayne, and he's going to talk about how to get involved, how to contact your legislators, how to get through all those scary steps. So take it away, Wayne.
Thank you, Anna. I wanted to let everyone know that we as a coalition have been working together. We work together, we help each other, and that's one of the bonuses of being together in the coalition that we have here. And so I just want to tell you a few things about what we did to try to encourage our members to become more involved. And first off, I don't know if every group has an updated membership list, but we work very diligently to make sure that our membership list is updated with current addresses, current phone numbers, and emails as much as possible. And so those three things help us then to communicate to our members. And so we try very hard to make sure that they understand what's going on in a timely basis, because time is of essence when you're working with the legislature. And so we, this year we've tried several new things. I know that the WEA worked on a postcard campaign, and we encouraged our members to help with that if they could. And there were several that did or were able to do that. And that was impressive. I know that I saw the reaction to several legislators saw the pile of postcards. They were amazed at the response that they received. And so it was great to see that participation. And so it's a communication, communicating out to our members and all coalition members the need to act temporarily on what is happening. Now, I'm going to cover three areas that we focused on. The first area was before the session started. There were collections of legislators' phone numbers, email addresses that we shared with everyone that we could. This helped them to know how to communicate with their legislators. We also encourage all of our people to talk with their legislators personally. Especially, we found it was very effective if they were to talk to the person who actually represented them in their district, because they knew then that someone in their district was following what was happening and was informed and knew what to do and say to them. So we would share then things like assignments, legislative assignments that were given out. We shared information that we knew about any coalition activities that were going to happen, as well as bills that had been pre-filed or were ready to be filed, so that they knew that these were coming up. Now, the second area then we talked about to our members were those areas of involvement during the session itself. Now, this becomes a timely issue because, as we know, this session lasted a different time span than it usually does, because they met for a while, then they recessed, and then they met again. And they even have some sessions or some activities planned for the summer. And so we are encouraging those people to understand what those bills were. Now, there were several things that we followed very closely. We wanted to thank WEA for their legislative work, and especially the daily newsletters or the emails that were sent out telling us the status of those bills, because we then forwarded those to our email list. We used our email list for the first time this year very effectively by forwarding those emails on to our members. And so we were excited to see that on again, a daily update on those. We also were sharing interests of their coalition members and the interest that they had in those bills. And so we would encourage all of those people to not only work with our legislators, but if they knew some of the people that were in some of the other coalition groups, to contact them and have them also let their feelings be known. And so once they had done that, we had several of our members report back to us as leaders how it had gone. And it was very interesting. In fact, this one person has said suggested to me, they said, when I contacted my legislator, they were surprised that I was up and ready to talk about something that was on the floor that very day. And they were really excited about that. They were, in fact, the legislators were impressed with that. And so during the session itself, it's a very busy time, but email seems to be the best, or phone calls. And those two pieces of information that were given out previous to the session were very useful to our members, and we shared that with them. Now, I don't know if other groups all have newsletters on a timely basis, or bulletins, or other things that they send out to their members, but those are all ways of communicating. And I think communication is the key to all of this success in this. Right now we're in the post-session era, and we've got some things coming up, and we are putting together our latest newsletter, which will go out and report the successes and the strengths that we had during this session. And we're going to talk about that and share with them so that they can then visit with their local legislator and go back and say, I understand this happened, and this is what we would really like to see happen, and we understand how it works. The one thing I was really impressed with the most was that WEA sent out a list of people who had worked very hard on the things that we talked about here today. And they said, please send them a thank you. And so we encouraged our members to do that too. Send those people who had worked very hard on trying to get things done in the legislative session, and give them a thank you. And I think that's impressive when people will come back and give a thank you to that. Now, we also are getting prepared for this summer, because we know that there are going to be some sessions held during the summer. We know that next fall there will probably be some new bills introduced, and we want to make sure that our members are aware of that. So we will continue to send out an email, or we will use phone calls to call people that we know to let them know what's going on, because we want them to be aware of what's happening for next year. And so the coalition members, I think we have worked very well together. We're really happy with the coalition. And we appreciate every one of you people that are here today on this session, because we know that you have done something to help us make that possible, which we could not have done alone. We know that. And so this is why the coalition has been a success for us. And thank you so much for participating in all of this.
Awesome. Thanks, Wayne. I'm going to move our agenda around a little bit. I'm actually going to ask panelists for final takeaways, like 30, 60 seconds each, and then we'll go to Q&A. So Vicki, why don't you get us started? What is your final takeaway that you would like to mention?
I just echo what everybody's been saying, and also the fact that this is an amazing coalition to work with. People have passion, and they have knowledge, and they have purpose to bring those three things together, and you've got a heck of a group. But one thing I wanted to add to my presentation about why do we need a COLA is that what a lot of people weren't aware of, and I was not either. I had an opportunity to do a national interview, and Michael Fike from the WRS helped me with one of the questions I didn't know the answer to. The question is, well, how do beneficiaries, how does that benefit your community? So he looked it up, and we figured out that for every $1 a beneficiary gets from their pension, $1.21 goes back to the community. And so we as retirees are giving to our community in service that we do, in our organizations that we belong to, and we're able to do that because sometimes that takes a little funds. And so not only does my dollar bring $1.21 back to the community in the goods and the services that I get from my community. Also, I'm able, with a little extra money, to support the organizations that I'm committed to. So your pension money is when we're talking about getting you a bit of a raise, we're not just talking about you getting a bit of a raise. It really will benefit and help our communities statewide. And if you look at the WRS website at any point, and Mike, maybe you can speak to this when you get to it, most of the money that we have a lot of retirees who move out of the state and go other places, but in Wyoming, most of the people stay here. So the money that comes to us through our pension stays and benefits our communities and not only ourselves. So thank you.
Awesome. Does anyone else want to jump in with a final takeaway?
Anna, I want to tell everybody that this coalition is a great group. It's very strong. And as people work on legislation for their organization, if you do it alone, yeah, sometimes you're heard. But when you add more groups and more voices, the stronger that voice becomes. And so if you take the total of all of our groups, memberships, or who we represent, you're up there in the 50 and 60,000 people. So when you go to a legislator and you say, I'm part of the coalition for a healthy retirement and we're representing 60,000, that voice is strong. And that is why I am proud to be a part of this group.
I'll jump in, just echoing what Betty Jo said. It's all about power. And we have more power if we have more people. That's one thing. And secondly, they don't necessarily want to hear from me. They see me at the Capitol every day. They want to hear from you. They want to hear from their constituents. So the more that you can be involved, the better. And don't be afraid to do it. We're here to provide the resources, the information, so you're comfortable having that conversation with legislators. As Wayne mentioned, you take the daily update armed with information, and most importantly, they're just citizen legislators. They're people that you see at the grocery store, and they want to hear from you. So I guess that's my takeaway.
Awesome. Does anyone else want to go before we move on to Q&A?
I'd just like to say, thanks for all the support of the coalition from all the members. The emails, the phone calls, the legislatures really listen to that. And like Ron and Betty Jo said, we can't be successful as lobbyists in the lobby if we don't have the backing of all the members of the coalition writing their senators and representatives on our issues. So that grassroots lobbying is crucial to any success that we're going to make in addressing some of these pension issues.
Awesome. Wayne, do you have a parting thought?
No, I just want you to know though that communication is the key to all of this, and we had several ways of communicating this year, and I think they're effective. I can remember back when I first started teaching school, it was write a letter or a postcard to the person, and that was about all we had. And I think now we have so many different ways we can communicate, and we need to use those resources to help us in some way to let our legislators know our feelings, because they are. And I'm surprised with Vicki's graph that shows how little so many are getting. And I'm just surprised that they're not crying louder, because they really do need to have that. And I really agree with her also that our pension money supports our own community. And that's the one thing we can talk to up and down our main streets. We can talk to those merchants and let them know that in fact, I do. I try to let them know I'm spending my retirement money here in your store. And we need to let them know that, because that's a strong point in Wyoming.
Awesome. Thanks, Wayne. And with a few minutes left, I'm going to pass it over to Deputy Director Mike Bleakley, and he'll cover questions that may have come up in the chat and anything else that you think is relevant.
Great, thank you, Anna. You guys make it easy for me being such a part of such a knowledgeable panel. I feel like, well, I don't know what's left for me to do, but I appreciate the invite, and you always make us feel so welcome, and it's easy to provide you with education and information. I think you guys have relevant questions, and we try to respond to all our constituents, and that includes all of you, of course, our membership, and then legislators, and they do come to us asking questions on a wide variety of topics. And sometimes it's a niche topic. It's something that affects one or two people. Maybe, they want community service police officers to be in the law enforcement plan instead of the public employee plan. So we do get these, and maybe that affected two people in the entire state of Wyoming. So we do get questions that are very specific, and then we get questions that are very broad. I am going to share two links with you in the chat. The first one is our summary report. This is a great kind of, I would call it more of a brochure, but this hits the highlights. There's great talking points overall for the pension. This is something that we do provide to our legislators, but I think it has information. One of the graphs that's in this document shows that the Wyoming pension costs 2% of the entire state's budget, and that puts us 50 out of 50. I know the numbers have changed a little bit in the last year, but we are the most affordable pension of all 50 states, where the national average is 5%. I also would like to draw your attention to our YouTube page, and this is where we put up all of our videos. And I think we do have a town hall presentation that has been recorded in its entirety, which you can view on our YouTube page. Let me get that there if it's pasting. But we also have videos about Finance 101 or the different options. If you're looking at retiring in the public plan, do I want option, 1, 2, or 3? There's lots of educational materials. So I do encourage you to tune in there and take a look at those. As far, I want to stay on time. The questions in chat, I think, we did talk about legislators. They are not automatically part of the system. They are only part of the system if they had employment outside the legislature, such as a teacher. So for example, the prior Speaker of the House, Steve Harshman, is also the football coach up at Natrona County High School. So his day job participates in the retirement system. So there are many, and there's active members who work for state government here in Cheyenne that are also members of the legislature. So that's not a study we have that correlates that, but I think you could probably do that pretty easily. I do see one question about state retirement not listed in the Wyoming state investment portfolio. You can certainly ask for clarification, but state treasury has about 19 billion, and we're actually pushing towards 10 billion right now in the portfolio. I just logged in today because I had to do a money transfer, but our retirement system continues to grow, and I don't know if we're half the amount of treasury, but it's important to remember that that's a completely different pool of funds from the retirement system. One other person asked about the COLA and designing it so people who have been, I think they said the oldest retirees. So when we looked at it, we figured out there's so many different ways you can calculate a 13th check. Length of service, age, time since they've been retired. What we focused on was time since retired, because that's going to be, those are the people that because of inflation have seen their purchasing power go down the most. Kevin talked about firefighters not getting Social Security, and a reason why COLAs are such a big deal in the public protection sector with fire and police is because a lot of those people do not get a COLA and they're not part of Social Security. And so they need a COLA more than someone who maybe is also getting Social Security where a COLA is granted. Although we certainly know that the public pension, no matter which plan you're in, is so important to your complete retirement security as a retiree. So I did also, so anyway, I don't want to get too much into that, but basically it was 1/10 of 1% per year retired. So 30 years retired times 0.1 would be 3% for your 13th check. If you were retired 1 year, it'd be 1/10 of 1%. So we were trying to take care of those people that have been retired the longest because they've seen the value of their money go down so much. And with the last COLA being granted in 2008, we're really looking about a 25% diminishing of that purchasing power. So if you got $1,000 a month back then, now that's worth about $750. So it really is considerable. I could talk for a long, long time. You guys have been great. I see our executive director, David Swindell, has been watching the panel, and we certainly appreciate everything he does for the system. And thanks, Dave, for chiming in and being here. And then I see one other question: is one of the elements of WRS in trouble and maybe a focus of future legislation? That's a really broad question. I would say that when we look at funding status, basically all of the plans are on an upward trajectory. And that's in that summary report that I linked. But whatever the funding status of our plans, and we've got, 70, 80, 90% funding status, depending on which plan, we're moving towards 100%. And all of the plans are scheduled to meet 100% within 30 years, except for Paid Fire A. And my guess is that we don't have anyone on this call from Paid Fire A. I could be wrong, but Paid Fire A does require, as Director Swindell is saying, a legislative solution. We did get that assigned just in this last week, and I shouldn't say we. The legislature decided to make that an interim topic. So they are going to study Paid Fire A. It is scheduled to run out of money in about 5.5 years. And so there's great interest in the plan. I think we're at 267 retirees. There was one active up in Casper, and he may have retired here in the last year. So it's an older population. It does, the age range, there's people who are in their 60s that probably are still in that plan, and then it goes up to people in their 80s. But it's the only plan out of all of our 8 defined benefit plans that does have a COLA, and that's guaranteed by statute. So it doesn't affect a huge number of people, although the people it does affect, it affects them greatly. So if you hear about the retirement system in the news and something negative, that potentially is what you might hear. But I think the retirement system is very strong. I think we're headed in the right direction. We have passed legislation in years past that has been really positive for the fund. We combined our volunteer fire department, which actually is one of the larger plans, because Wyoming doesn't have that many paid fire departments. We have a lot of rural areas that need those rural firefighters. They depend on them. And so that's a big plan. And we combine that with the EMTs, emergency medical technicians, and that really strengthened the plans. They were stronger together. So we're always looking for ways to improve the plan and improve the funding status. And our board did pass a resolution that they support COLAs, which, cost of living adjustment. And we also call it an inflation adjustment, because cost of living sort of implies almost a raise, and it's really not. It's an inflation adjustment. The power of your money has gone down. And so you need this inflation adjustment just to keep up, just so your money is worth what it was worth yesterday. So with that, I will open it up to chat or panelists if there's any other questions. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share what I know.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. And we're a little bit past, so I'll just do a closing. I would also say if you have questions, I just dropped our email in the chat. Feel free to send an email there. If I can't help you, I will work with WRS and we'll get it taken care of. But other than that, thank you so much for joining us tonight. The Equality State Policy Center is the fiscal sponsor for the Wyoming Coalition for Healthy Retirement. So if you would like to make a donation, use the web address in the chat. Also, earlier in the chat was our sign up for our newsletter. That's totally free. Please sign up and stay up to date. And thanks so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your night.